Hi there, this is David Weiss, your board game concierge here at 401 Games, and this week's Smorgasboard is Sonora, the second game designed by Rob Newton from Colorado and published by Pansasaurus Games. Sonora is the very first flick and write, which means instead of rolling dice or flipping cards, you'll be using dexterity to determine what actions you take each round when you write them down on your individual player scoring sheet. So let's look in the box and see whether Sonora is the game for you. Sonora can be played by 1 to 4 players over 5 to 7 rounds, depending on how long a game you want. Each round is split into flicking and writing phases. In the flicking phase, you guessed it, flick your discs from one corner of this mini crokinole style board into a map sort of modeling the Sonora Valley. Most of the time, you will land in one of the 4 regions that correspond to the 4 regions of your scorecard. Now, so you'll be flicking from one corner from the whole game. So when you flick, then whichever region you mainly end up in, that's where you're going to be taking your action with that particular disc and that particular value. Now, there are some bonus regions. So inside here, there's actually a bonus region that if you end up touching it, you're going to take that bonus action not in the mudcrack region, but in fact, in the caves region. So once all the discs have been flicked, and you're going to flick them 2 at a time. So, I flick 2 discs, and then the next person flicks 2 discs, and so on and so forth. If you land in the middle, then you get to choose which region you're going to take the action with. Once all the discs have been flicked, you then move to the right phase and take the actions. And you're going to transfer the actions to each quadrant. So in the caves region, you're aiming to be the first person to fill up entire hexagonal spot caves. In the canyon region, you're going to be each individual disc will be a kind of domino-shaped piece, a Tetris-shaped piece, which you will then cover squares here. In the dry riverbed section, you will be exploring, crossing off circles, and circling where you end up. And finally, in the ever so fun to say mudcrack region, you will be surrounding triangular areas, trying to surround areas for points. So each region is like its own mini game. In the caves and the mudcracks, so in these 2 regions, you're going to add up the values of the discs that end up on the board to take your one set of actions, whereas in the riverbed and the canyon, each individual disc gives you a separate action. Of course, each region also scores differently. So if you are the first player to completely explore this, you will get 15 points and a bonus action. Everyone else will have to settle for 13 points. Here, you are aiming to cover as many similar type cactuses, and there are 3 different types, as possible. So if you cover 4 different of the dark green cactuses, that'll get you 14 points, and so on and so forth. In the dry riverbed region, you will score the sum of all the circled numbers that you get to, and in the mudcrack region, you will score according to the number of barrel cactuses and light green cactuses and dark blue cactuses that you get. You can also use leftover values here for bonus actions. So that is the whole other layer. There's bonuses available. You start the game with 1 reflick bonus, which lets you pick up the disc that you just flicked and reflick it. And there's also a swap bonus, which lets you, after all the flicking has been done, take 2 of your discs and swap where they are. So that lets you mitigate a bit of luck. Then there are a bunch of other different kinds of bonuses that let you either take bonus actions or buff your abilities and so on. So later in the game, it can be quite slow to figure out what order you want to take your actions because of the different combos that you can trigger. So is Sonora the game for you? Well, it's pretty easy to learn and teach. The rules are pretty straightforward, although the section on using bonuses is a little confusing. The artwork and graphic design are excellent. I love the color palette. It's very evocative of the American Southwest. As far as gameplay, if you like roll and writes and flip and writes, then you probably will want to try this because it's a little twist. The flicking is an original mechanic, obviously, but if you suck at it, then I can see how the game would be frustrating. There are some neat strategies, though, in terms of deciding which discs you flick and when. But with more players, I think it's a little more chaotic, and you might, again, feel frustrated at not being able to mitigate too much, although if you use your reflex and swaps, that does give you some ability to do that. Now, on the other hand, if you like dexterity games and have never played a roll and write, then you might find the scoring and the writing and scoring parts a little overwhelming at first, because there are 4 different ways to score, 4 different strategies, and you kind of have to learn how to combo everything together. There's also the solo mode, which is quite challenging and a little confusing because the rules don't actually specify that you're only using the one score sheet and then using the AI discs to fill up your own score sheet, taking away decisions from you, as opposed to playing against the AI. So you're really just trying to beat your own score, and they don't even give you a score threshold to try and beat, to give you any indication of whether you've done well or not. So that's a bit of a letdown. I can see how Sonora might overstay its welcome depending on how fast your group is and how many players you're playing with. Like I said before, the game can really slow down in later rounds because of all the options you have deciding what to do when and how to trigger off your combos. 5 rounds, which is a short game, seems plenty to me, even just with 2 players. But if you and your group don't think too hard and just kind of have fun flicking, then by all means go for it. So, click on the link below to order your copy of Sonora. This is David Weiss, your board game concierge here at 41games.ca. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao.